everyone, welcome back to my Earth Friendly Kitchen. I'm Maria, your host, and today we are making a Moroccan lentil soup. Moroccan inspired, I guess you would say, lentil soup. It's super cozy, really delicious, very warm and vibrant flavors. Flavors. And it's just something that I love because it's kind of like a pantry meal, but it's really elevated in a lot of ways, and I'll show you why. But we're just going to start with the basics today. So we're going to start with our celery stalks, and I'm just going to cut off the edges here to get those kind of like crispy bits off. You know how it is when you get the celery, when they're already cut, they get a little bit like brownish on the ends. But I'm still going to save them because they're still good. They're just, a little brown. And I'm just going to cut them into really nice dices. So first I'm going to start with my sticks and cut them into nice long pieces. Now these were on sale, the celery like hearts, so that's why I got these kinds. But you can use the regular whole celeries, and if they're bigger, you may not need as much, because these are kind of small stalks, so you might only need two, if you have like the really big celery stalks. But you also are going to gauge on how much you want to make for, your family or whatever you're making it for. And then I'm just going to cut it up into nice small dices, nice and even. Make sure you're tucking your hands in as you go down so you don't get your fingers in there. And you just want it to be nice and even and uniform because, for one, it's a soup, right? So everything should be a little bit of a small dice, not super, super chunky in this particular soup. But also, the more even cuts you have, the more even it cooks. So that's, you want it to not, you don't want to have one huge piece of celery and then one small piece of celery, and the small one's mushy and the big one is like super crunchy, I mean, listen. It adds for diversity, I guess, but not your preferred. And then we're going to do 2 carrots here. I'm just going to peel them. Again, everything has been washed already. So I'm just peeling everything, the extra skin off. You could leave the skin on if you wanted to. Sometimes I do, especially when I make it into a soup, because it gets, nice and cooked through. But this guy started to sprout a little bit, so I'm just going to cut off like the ends of him because I'm not going to just cut the sprouts in. And because it's sprouted, he's actually going in the composter. But just because it's sprouted doesn't mean it's gone bad, right? It's just that those extra parts are starting to get a little bit more like overripe. And so the flavor is not going to quite be the same as if you had like a less ripe, It's not until, obviously it looks like it's going to rot that you don't want to eat it. If you have like really, really dark spots or something like that, you would want to cut those off, or maybe, not use it altogether. But this guy is going to just go in the composter because he's still got some nutrients left, even though he's sprouted. That'll be good for the garden. And then there. And then you're just going to, do the same thing with your carrot. I like to cut the carrot into really workable slices. So I cut it down as much as I can, and then I work my way through it so that it gets me nice, even dices for the carrots. I'm just going to cut these into 3s. Again, depending on the size of your carrots, you may need to make more cuts. Some are very big, some are very small. That's what we like, the imperfections and the variety that we get of our vegetables. So this is what you would consider a classic kind of mirepoix. Mirepoix is a French term. It's just, it's actually from a French aristocrat from the 18th century. His cook in his household was apparently the one who invented the mirepoix, like invented this flavor profile of vegetables to go together, which is carrots, onions, and celery. Now, if you go down south in America to New Orleans, they do their own kind of mirepoix. They call it the Holy Trinity, and it's actually celery, onions, and bell peppers. So, and in New Orleans, they are influenced by French cuisine because they were founded by French conquistadors. Oh, a little history lesson for you today. We love little tidbits like that of where things come from. You know, I think about that a lot. My husband's really good for things like that, like historical references and whatnot. So, all right, so that's all going in the pool as well. Now, typically I would use like a white onion or even a yellow onion for this dish, but lo and behold, I thought I had, and I didn't. So I have red onions. So that's what we're going to use today, guys. Because, again, use what you got. You know, don't let it go to waste. It's going to be just as good. It does have a little bit of a different flavor, but when you cook them down, you know, onions in general, when you cook them down into like a soup of sorts, they really all give off a lot of the same flavor. And it's going to be blended in, so you're not going to, you know, I'm not looking for a color change or anything like that, you know, from the vegetables. So I'm just going to peel this off, and of course this onion wants to give me a hard time today. Peel this off. Now this is going to be going in my freezer bag because this is still very good. And I know it's weird because it's the peels, but if you haven't seen me do this before, this is what I call my scrappy freezer bag. And I take these scraps once it's all filled up and I make my own vegetable broth with it. And it's really packed because, you know, even though these are like the outer skins and stuff, a lot of the stuff still has a lot of the good nutrients in it. So we put everything in there, like broccoli stems and onion butts and, you know, celery butts and things like that. And we just used it to every last bit, and it makes a really delicious broth. I'm actually going to be using a store-bought broth today because I am out of my own broth because it is soup season around here, so I'm making a lot of soups. So I'm going through that broth like crazy. But normally, you know, at least for a couple of soups, I won't have to use store-bought because I make my own. And so, and my bag wasn't quite full yet. And I like to wait till it's all the way filled before I do that. So we'll be using store-bought. That's why I said it's kind of like a pantry meal, because there's a lot of store-bought packaged foods that we're going to be using. Not a lot. I mean, there's just like a handful of ingredients in general. But this is just adding that little bit of like extra flavor and depth of texture to your dish. So we're just going to, these cloves, look at this clove of garlic. My goodness, that is a monster clove. So we're only going to be putting in 2 of these because they are huge. And usually, you know, I put in like 4 or 5 because we're garlic lovers around here. But since these are so big, you know, I'm going to gauge that. You know, the more comfortable you get in your kitchen when you're making dishes like this, the more you will kind of be able to gauge, you know, when you need to adjust the amount of what you have, because, you know, it's a bigger piece or a smaller piece. You know, like this is why people, they get comfortable with what they're used to. And when you go to the grocery stores, you know, you'll see somebody really searching for like that perfect size, whatever, you know, it is that they're trying to look for, you know, the perfect onion or the perfect garlic head, because they want those, you know, what they're familiar with. But, you know, once you get more comfortable in the kitchen, you'll be, you know, feeling a little bit more adventurous and be able to adjust as needed no matter what. And then you can start seeking out the ugly fruit and the ugly vegetables. And that is, you know, where you actually get to save a lot of those guys from going in the garbage. So you do a good deed towards veggies. Look what I'm doing. I have this whole thing, this scraper that I brought over here so I wouldn't have to use my knife, and I forgot to use it. Because you know what? It's just you get used to doing it one way. You try to, you know, pivot. But I feel like this is going to keep me from, you know, less chance of cutting my finger, for one. And for two, it won't scrape up my board as much either. All right, I'm just cutting up this potato. Speaking of ugly vegetables, look at this big old potato. It's gigantic and it's super misshapen, but it's okay. It still eats good. I was gonna do 2 potatoes, but then when I saw this guy, I said I only need 1. So not only did that save my food costs, because I got less, at the store, but again, I probably saved this guy from the trash bin because he was probably gonna go in if somebody else didn't want him. That doesn't, follow the rule of pick the ugly fruits first. Fruits and veggies, I should say. All right, so I'm just peeling off his skin, and then I'm gonna throw him. These guys also, now these you could also take and, because you washed your outside of your potato, even though you're taking off the skin. You could take these scraps and make potato chips out of them. Like, they're super crispy, crunchy. Maybe I'll do that one day for you guys. I'll show you how to do that. But I've done that, and it's just such a great way, again, to use the whole part of the, vegetable. I'm going to use mine, for the broth. It'll give it a little bit added starchiness to it, and potassium, because potatoes are very high in potassium, for those of you that didn't know. So I'm just cutting him down to size. I like to make him as uniform as possible, like we said. So you cut these guys down in half. And then now they're easier to cut into sticks. Now I'm going to separate the potatoes from the mirepoix. This is like mirepoix plus, because this plus got garlic added to it. But I'm going to keep them separate because I'm going to be sweating these guys a little bit, and we're not going to sweat the potatoes. We're just going to throw them in with the lentils, so we don't have to put them all in at the same time. So these guys get their own pool for a little while. Okay, so slices. Now when you prep everything ahead of time like this, it makes it so much easier. Like when you actually do your cook, you do like, this is called mise en place, another French term that means everything in its place. So I don't speak French, by the way, but cooking uses a ton of French terms. So I think I've just learned by listening to other chefs, like all these years. So that's why I learned the terms. I didn't look it up, like, honestly. I just learned from watching other people. But mise en place means everything in its place. And so that just helps your cook go smoother, because it's like, if you're trying to do everything at once, well, these are sweating. If I wanted to cut up my potatoes, okay, maybe I could get away with that because it'll take a few minutes. But some things cook really fast. And then if you're in the middle of prepping something else while this thing is cooking, then you risk overcooking or burning even, the first part of your meal. And then it's like you waste it, because it's ruined. So it's good to have everything prepped ahead of time while you're, before you start actually turning on the heat, unless you're preheating. And then of course that's different when you bake something. Okay. So look at how much potato this guy made. So this is going to go really well in our soup. It's going to give it some really nice starch flavor. I'm going to use him. Some really good starchy flavor and or starchiness, and kind of thicken up the broth when we're cooking, which is going to go really nicely because this is going to be like a nice hearty soup. You could even blend it a little bit if you wanted to, but I'm going to leave it whole today. Or you could omit the potatoes. If you're watching your potassium for whatever reason, or you're watching your carbohydrate intake for dietary purposes, lentils are already high in carbohydrates, right? But they're also super high in fiber and super high in protein. So they're really great powerhouse beans. They're tiny, but they pack a punch. And so if you don't want that extra starch, you can just omit the potatoes and probably maybe use a little bit less broth, but we'll go through that. All right, so that's it. We're going to take this over to the stove and we're going to put it all together. Okay. So this is the rest of my mise en place. I have here my vegetable stock, some diced tomatoes in a can, my olive oil, which I'm gonna go ahead and throw in over a medium to high heat, about 2-3 tablespoons or so, because you do have quite a bit of veggies here. And then I'm just gonna toss everybody in the pool. And then I'm using red lentils today because it's a Moroccan inspired dish. We use like some paprika and turmeric. I'm using a little bit of saffron, which would also kind of tint the soup anyways. But you could use green lentils, brown lentils. You'd be surprised how many different types of beans there are out there, which is really fortunate because my daughter actually really loves beans, and she eats them quite a bit. So these need to sweat just a little bit. So these I kind of rinsed and dried off. You don't have to necessarily rinse them, but it does take away some of the extra starchiness when they come fresh like this. I'm using the Bob's Red Mill. You can use any brand you want. This is just what, was what I had in the store near me is what we found. And then I use just a straight vegetable stock. When I buy it from the store, I do try to stick to the vegan ones just because I can't have dairy, just in case. Sometimes people put cheese in their broth, which I think is interesting, which I've done. I mean, I have Parmesan rinds that I'll throw into something like a chicken soup just to give it a little extra. So people do that with vegetable stock too, to just add to the flavor. It gives it a little bit more like umami. But because I can't usually have, like, I know what kind of cheese I buy that I can tolerate. I don't know exactly what kind of cheese they're putting in other stuff. So, this is the benefit of cooking from home. So you see these are really, really coming together. They're starting to glisten a little bit. Now you're going to throw this in. You're not going to cook them down. You just want to kind of pull the flavor out of them. Like make them, you'll know because you'll kind of start to smell a little bit. And while that's working, we're going to toast the beans a little bit. So this is 1.5 cups of lentils. So I'm just going to toss it right in there with the veggies. And the same thing with the idea of sweating your vegetables. Anytime you really cook beans or even rice from scratch, you want to kind of try to toast it a little bit on the outside, because what that does is it starts to kind of almost like if you think of like a popcorn, right? A little corn kernel, when you heat it up and as it gets toasted, that outer shell bursts, right? You're not trying to burst your beans here, but you are trying to get them to start to really open up a little bit to absorb the water that you're going to add, or the broth, the liquid that you're going to put in your dish. Okay? So you're really just going to do that for a few minutes. And that's already starting to smell. This is like my favorite smell, just this like initial, I should say, mirepoix, but then it's going to get even better when we add all the flavorful spices to it. All right. So we're going to add to that our tomatoes. Now this is a 28-ounce can of diced tomatoes. I put the juice in and everything. Okay. Then you're going to add my potatoes. Okay. And I'm going to do my seasonings first. I'm going to do 2 teaspoons of cumin or cumino. I'm going to do 2 teaspoons of ground coriander. Okay. I'm going to do 1 teaspoon of paprika, but I'm going to make like a heaping teaspoon. It's almost like 1 1/4 probably, like a heaping, which means it goes over the top of it's not a flat teaspoon. It's going to be a little bit more. And then I'm going to do the same thing, a heaping tablespoon or teaspoon of the turmeric. Okay. And then I'm just going to do half of a teaspoon. See the difference? This is like a flat teaspoon. It's more flat, more even to the spoon itself. It's not heaping over. Half of a teaspoon of crushed red pepper. And then this, I believe, is the piece de resistance. This is called saffron. It's a Spanish saffron that I purchased, so it's a little bit cheaper, but saffron in general is the most expensive herb on the planet. So I don't use it a lot. I use it pretty sparingly, and you also don't need that much. So this little jar cost me $6, which I know sounds like a lot, but this will last me all year because you need literally this little pinch to just flavor, maybe actually a little bit more than that, maybe like an extra tiny, tiny little pinch to flavor and perfume this entire dish. And it's gonna just be so, so nice. So $6, you know, for that little jar. I know it's like more for like a traditional spice that you would get, but it lasts like forever because you're not gonna use a ton of it with your meals. And then I'm just gonna add the broth here. Now this is a whole quart or 4 cups. And then I'm gonna add another 2 cups to this, another half of the quart, so it's a pint of this. I'm going to do about half of this. So that's to feel about half. We measure with love around here, you know. So, all right, so I'm just going to give this a good stir. And then the last thing I'm going to put in here is salt. I'm just going to put a little bit of salt in here for now until really things start to kind of cook down. I don't want to add too much in the beginning necessarily because I want it to be able to, like all the other flavors really perfume it, because, you know, when you use a lot of other flavors and spice, you really want to give those a chance to like marry together. And then you could always add more salt later. You can't take away. You could always add. But the salt will help and not only season it, but it helps all those other flavors to come through in a really great way. Okay, so you can see it looks very soupy now, but as this cooks down, because the lentils are going to absorb a lot of the liquid, it's going to become a little bit more thickened up. Plus that potato starch is going to come in there as well. So I just want to taste for now. Already good. Now obviously the saffron hasn't broken down and really perfumed it yet, but it's going to, and it's going to be even better. So we are going to bring this up to a boil. We're going to cover and bring it up to a boil. And then once it comes up to a boil, we're going to turn it down and we're going to let it simmer for 30 to 40 minutes. Okay. So once it comes back in 30 to 40 minutes, we'll see you then. Okay. So it has been about 35 minutes or so, and this is looking pretty good to be done. So I'm just going to put this here. Now you can see as we stir, we've lost quite a bit of that liquid, but it's become really nice and hearty and nice. Okay, so I'm just going to taste it, see if it needs anything extra right now while I get the rest ready. I think it's perfect. At this point, you could add like more salt and pepper to your taste, to your likings, but I think it's actually perfect. It's just going to get a little bit of lemon, and I'm just going to squeeze it right into, careful of the seeds, as you saw. Thought I was going to escape that one. Let's put that guy there. Careful of the seeds. And then I'm just going to give it a nice stir, and this is done. Okay, so the lemon's just really going to brighten that flavor and just make everything come together so nicely and bloom. Okay, such a hearty veggie. I'm going to take this other half a lemon, and I'm actually going to squeeze that into this bowl here. You get about a tablespoon or so in there of lemon juice. And I have a little bit of parsley. I'm going to cut that up just nice and fine. Chop. Okay, nice little dice there. And we're gonna make a little bit of a yogurt drizzle for this because this has such warm flavors and it's just so hearty. It's really nice to give it some freshness and brightness with a little bit of yogurt. Now I'm just gonna put about half a cup of yogurt in here, about 2 tablespoons of tahini, which is essentially sesame seed paste, and another sprinkle of salt. And we're just going to mix that in together. Get those herbs, splash. Get those herbs in there, nice and mixed up. This is going to just make it, I don't know, it's going to give it like an added creaminess to this dish that it also will cool down some of that little bit of spice. There's not a lot of spice in this, but there's crushed red pepper, right? And the other flavors, really come together. So just gonna, so yummy. All right. So we're just gonna put this all together so you can see what it looks like. Oh man, I can't wait to dive into this. Looks so good. Just beautiful, rich colors. That turmeric, that saffron just really blooms so beautifully. You can probably make this look a little bit more beautiful than I am at the moment, but it doesn't take much, just a little bit to add it through. You can stir it in. Just take one more bite with that addition of the lemon and the cream. Veggies have a little bit of that crunch still to them. They're not fully mushy. The beans are going to be nice and soft. You get that really, just everything plays really well together. You get texture, you get depth of flavor, that creaminess that tahini sauce brings in. Oh, can't wait for you guys to try this one. It is full-fledged soup season in this house, and we're going to be bringing soups from all different kinds of cultures because I love them all. And I hope you like and subscribe to my channel to follow for some more. Enjoy it, guys. Try it.